In the remote village of Black Hollow, nestled deep within a forest that seemed to breathe, there was a house that no one dared to enter. It was said that the house was alive, that it fed on those who stayed too long. When Clara, a journalist investigating urban legends, decided to spend a week there, she would learn that some legends are all too real. Clara arrived at the house on a stormy evening. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain lashed against her car as she pulled up to the decrepit structure. The house loomed before her, its windows shattered and its roof sagging. The air smelled of damp wood and something else, something metallic, like blood. As she stepped inside, the floorboards groaned under her weight, and the door slammed shut behind her. The house seemed to exhale, a low, guttural sound that made her skin crawl. She told herself it was the wind, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. That night, Clara was awakened by a sound, a wet, slithering noise, like something dragging itself across the floor. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding. The sound was coming from the hallway. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped out of the room, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. The hallway was empty, but the floor was wet, as if something had crawled through. She followed the trail to the bathroom, where the door stood slightly ajar. Inside, the mirror was fogged, and written in the condensation were two words: "Get out." The next day, Clara tried to convince herself it was a prank, but the house had other plans. As she explored, she began to hear whispers, soft, insidious voices that seemed to come from the walls. They spoke in a language she didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakably malevolent. She found herself drawn to the basement, where the whispers were loudest. The door was locked, but the key hung on a rusted nail nearby, as if waiting for her. Against her better judgment, she unlocked the door and descended into the darkness. The basement was a nightmare. The walls were covered in strange symbols, carved deep into the stone. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the floor was sticky with something dark and wet. In the center of the room was a chair, its legs bolted to the floor. The restraints were stained with what looked like blood. As Clara turned to leave, she heard a voice, a child's voice, whispering her name. She spun around, but the room was empty. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, until they were screaming in her ears. She ran up the stairs, slamming the door behind her. That night, Clara woke to the sound of scratching. It was coming from inside the walls. She pressed her ear to the plaster and heard it, a faint, rhythmic scraping, like something trying to claw its way out. The whispers returned, louder now, and she realized they weren't just in the walls, they were in her head. She tried to leave, but the doors and windows were sealed shut. The house seemed to pulse around her, its walls contracting and expanding like lungs. The air grew thick, and she struggled to breathe. The whispers became a single, deafening command: "Join us." In a desperate attempt to escape, Clara returned to the basement. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, and the chair in the center of the room was now occupied. The figure was humanoid but twisted, its limbs too long, its face a featureless void. It reached out to her, its fingers elongating like tendrils. Clara tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the house. The figure wrapped its arms around her, pulling her into the chair. The last thing she saw was the walls closing in, the symbols burning brighter, and the whispers becoming a single, deafening roar. The house still stands in Black Hollow, silent and waiting. Those who pass by swear they can hear whispers, and sometimes, if you look through the broken windows, you might see a shadowy figure sitting in the darkness. But no one dares to enter, because once the house takes you, it never lets go.